Heath, welcome, Kenny. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Stephen. Appreciate it. Hi. Forget that. I'm a preacher. You don't need to applaud. So, and even though the get-up is like this, as Stephen alluded to, when you're trying to make a go of a historical movie venue like this in our area, it's very difficult. Funny thing is that I live between here and Cumberland, and I'm the historian for the 1931 Embassy Theater up in downtown Cumberland. It's very difficult, I think, for us today, and me moving to this area from the Baltimore area in 1997, to realize that back in the day of the 1930s and 40s, this region was much more of a player than it is now. It was much more big stuff. So in that light, I'd like to take you back to opening day here at what was then called the New Kaiser Theater. Simply in the newspaper, it was billed as being new, but that was on the ads, New Kaiser Theater, September the 25th, 1939. The war in Europe, World War II, began earlier this month when Nazi Germany went into Poland and invaded. There was aggression, of course, happening with Imperial Japan over in Asia, but really, especially here on the East Coast, we were more focused on what was happening in Germany. At that point, it would be 2 years before the United States entered World War II because of the attack by Japan at Pearl Harbor. So the country was still dealing with a lot of isolationism. Let's don't get involved with this. So I'm not so sure how much impact these international issues had on folks locally here in Kaiser. Well, what was going on with the folks here in Kaiser? Well, when this theater opened, that made 3 places you could go see movies in Kaiser. The sister theater to this one, also owned by the Carskadden Company, was over this way. The building still stands, the Music Hall. Music Hall had been showing pictures since the silent era. And then Carskadden opened up the Kaiser Theater. Predating it by, I think, about 4 years, 1935, was the Liberty Theater. And we've been kind of putting our brains together about where was it, because you'll see ads for the Liberty in the Kaiser newspaper, but it gives you no location. And our best guess, that away, over towards where Martin's and that shopping center is now. The Liberty showed pictures into the early 1960s. You could go see a movie at the Music Hall into the late 1950s. Here at this theater, at the Kaiser, you could do that till 1977. There was a theater that opened up close to Westernport in that shopping center that now, if you just moved in, where's the shopping center? When I moved here in 1997, you could kind of still make it out. There was a couple of businesses still there. The Tri-Town theaters, they were the modern 1970s theater. They had 2 screens, and with that, that took away the commerce that would be coming in here to the Kaiser Theater. People in Kaiser, they didn't have a radio station. That wouldn't happen until 1953. So I would wager that the people of Kaiser, primarily for entertainment, the young people, listened to 2 kinds of music. Now, I'm dressed up in big band gear because I host Jukebox Friday Night, big band show. Well, yes, they were listening to big band music. Just up the road from us in Piedmont, West Virginia, the little giant of jazz, Don Redman, one of the prominent figures in the late 20s and through the 30s in big band jazz, that's where he's from. But they would have heard it by running an aerial, that is, going up to the top of their house and running a wire from one end to the other and connecting that to their radio to be able to pick up a station somewhere away. The closest radio station in 1939 to Kaiser was WTBO up in Cumberland. You go through the papers and you'll find that if there's any kind of shindig going on in Kaiser at the time and it's hosted by a radio personality, it's somebody from WTBO. So they probably could pick up that station pretty well, and at that time, TBO carried National Broadcasting Company Entertainment. Now, I'm bringing that up because September the 25th, it's a couple of months before NBC picks up the Grand Ole Opry from WSM Radio in Nashville, Tennessee. But people in this area most likely were also listening to old-time country music for 2 reasons. First of all, you had the National Barn Dance out of Chicago that was on a powerful station there and on NBC, and more importantly to West Virginians, The Wheeling Jamboree was on the air out of WWVA, Wheeling, West Virginia, with 50,000 watts, as many watts as an American station could have at that time. So that's the entertainment background. And then, of course, you had the movies. And let's talk about the movie that opened up the Kaiser Theater. In name only, RKO picture, Radio Keith Orpheum is what that stands for. A little background, still kind of like this today in Hollywood, but back in the 30s and 40s, there was a pecking order to the studios. The fanciest and most affluent of all the studios was Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer, MGM. After that came Paramount. After that, 20th Century Fox. Then you had kind of a log jam, Universal, RKO, Warner Brothers. And then after you got past Warner Brothers, you got into what was called the Poverty Row Studios, meaning low budget. That doesn't mean that they didn't make popular pictures, but they were lower budget. Columbia Pictures, if any of you are like me, a Three Stooges fan, that's where that came from. They specialized in these short 20-minute or two-reel comedies that were cheap to turn out. So you had Columbia, you had Monogram Pictures, which later became Allied Artists, and then you have things such as Republic Pictures, where the cowboy pictures were made with Roy Rogers, and at the bottom of the barrel, PRC, Producers Releasing Corporation. RKO, the studio that did in name only, is like right at the middle of all that. Not the most wealthy, but pretty good. The RKO studios were and still are adjacent to the Paramount studios in LA. I was out there in 2019, took the public tour at Paramount. If you ever go there, and I'm not trying to plug for them, but if you're a movie buff from that period, it's the one of the three to take, because you'll get to see everything. And part of it will be that they'll take you through RKO, and if you are into 1950s, 60s television, RKO was bought by a very powerful couple. Matter of fact, he led a big band for a while. Can anybody tell me who bought RKO and renamed it? Desi Arnaz, exactly, Desi Lou. So it's Desi Arnaz and Lucille Ball, and they'll tell you plenty of stories about Desi and Lucy and their work there on the lot. So it's always special to me to remember that. And RKO has that wonderful opening logo, the world with the radio tower for Radio Keith Orpheum, with the little lightning bolts coming out of it, and it says RKO Radio Picture. And originally they said Radio Picture. So our stars. We have top billing Carole Lombard. This was a step down for Carole Lombard. Carole was a big star at Paramount at the time. And remember the pecking order? This is about 2 or 3 up above RKO. But studios would lend their stars out to others, and we were starting to get where you'd have some independent contracting, where a person would go and play at whatever theater they get a job on the studio. So Carole is hired by the folks at RKO to star opposite Cary Grant. Now, Cary Grant was a mainstay at RKO. Here's where it gets a little bit interesting. Carole Lombard got paid $150,000 to make this movie. Translating $1939 to $2,022, that was a little over 3.1 mil. Cary was a little bit upset, so he did manage to get RKO to raise his salary. I don't know what he made on the picture before this, but they raised his salary to $100,000. But he was still second banana. Let me add to this our third star, one of my favorites from the golden age of Hollywood, Kay Francis. Kay is the brunette who will play Cary's wife. She's kind of the villain in this picture. Kay Francis, if this had been 3 years earlier, she would never be the second female lead. She was at Warner Brothers. She was the top money-grossing female star in Hollywood from 1930 to 1935. It gets a little complicated. Why she was no longer the lead star and why Carole Lombard is our star in this picture have a common ground. Katharine Hepburn, a stalwart at RKO, was originally intended to have the #1 lead, the Carole Lombard part. But just before this, there was an article that came out in the Hollywood Reporter that labeled Katharine Hepburn as Hollywood poison. She had had a few pictures that bombed at the box office, and RKO got cold feet. Kay Francis, by the way, was named in that same article as Hollywood poison. So Carole Lombard saw an opportunity, and she campaigned hard with RKO to get the female lead, the #1 lead, in this picture. Well, there was another reason she wanted to be in this film, because her husband was a itty bit busy during this time. Does anybody know who Carole Lombard was married to? The king of Hollywood. Frankly, my dear, I do not give up. And I'm a preacher, so I won't say the last word. Clark Gable. Gable was away with MGM, with Selznick actually, filming Gone with the Wind. She was bored. It's a very entertaining picture. It's the one that started it all. And matter of fact, let me add my gratitude to Stephen. You know, this theater closed as a movie house in 1977. Like many old classic theaters that didn't get the wrecking ball, thank the Lord, it became other businesses, roller rink, some other things. And then along came Stephen, and Stephen rescued it. So Stephen, thank you. And now enjoy the picture.